Kevin, once again, we have a marijuana topic. I'm going to start calling you Mr. Marijuana. I mean that with all respect and
Start
honor
calling
due.
me that, Dave. I think you've been calling me that for a while now, but this is an issue that it's not going away. In fact, it seems like it's accelerating. As most of you are aware, this last election cycle, there were 5 additional states that passed recreational marijuana laws. So not just medical marijuana, we're talking about recreational marijuana. These states are Montana, Arizona, South Dakota, New Jersey, and Mississippi. So it's spreading. I just read an article yesterday where it looked like the majority of voters in Wyoming would approve of recreational marijuana. So I have a feeling that this is something that if it's not in your state, it's coming soon. Or you may be in a state that's next to a state where this is happening. So with that in mind, it's just a kind of a blanket reminder that this is coming and your BSA program should be anticipating it.
Do you anticipate a redesign of the high intensity drug trafficking areas? I mean, I know that's not the same, like Interstate 80 across Nebraska and Iowa and all that, although marijuana isn't legal there. Do you think that, like, because Interstate 90 running across South Dakota, is that going to become a HITCA?
I think that they're going to reevaluate the concept entirely. I think that they're going to put it on individual banks to assess their own risk profile. And they'll still have these high risk areas, but I think it's going to evolve.
Well, in fact, I kind of see it as if every state is legalizing it. There isn't a high. They're all high, or they're all average, and I wonder if they need to reanalyze it that way. So,
it's especially when the current rule is you still need to be monitoring to make sure that marijuana that is legal in one state isn't crossing state lines. That's one of the things you're supposed to be watching.
Right.
So you could, just by virtue of being on the border of a state, you have to be aware of it and monitoring for it. So
part of the risk assessment, I mean, is these interstate systems. I mean, part of the risk assessment is these high intensity drug trafficking areas. And you look at Kansas, not legal at all, but Interstate 70 along there is definitely. And so the banks that are located close to that are in HITCAs, they call them. So ask a question. Jerod and Diane, you both talked about fair lending. You both mentioned age. You gave some examples of marital status discrimination. And I know, Jerod, you talked about they got to be old enough to enter a contract. Where, Diane, specifically at the NCUA, where were they mentioning age being a problem? Do they give any specific examples?
They did not give any specific examples for age during the one I listened to.
Too young? Might be, I'm assuming. Jerod, do you have any examples?
Yeah, what they were talking about is in judgmental scoring systems. So think more than just a lot of these software systems that the banks use where they enter in a bunch of information. Behind the scenes, there are weighted factors to all of the data that the applicant fills in, from your address to your name. I mean, all that stuff carries some sort of weight. In these programs, age carries with it a weight that is attributed to whether or not the loan ultimately gets approved. And so it's that behind the scenes, kind of like a proxy factor that they use. I've never run into that, but I know that those things are out there.
Well, Amy, I think it was you and I, correct? At that bank. I won't mention where it went. And Amy and I are working at different tables and I hear this, doof. And I'm like, wow, what's going on? And she says, listen to this. Pretty good balances for a young gal. It's file comment. And Jerod, I've heard you talk about this. There's 8 prohibited factors. They just hit 2: age, young, gal, sex. But I remember, Amy, your blood pressure went up a little bit. And we went and talked, and they were trying to be complimentary with that. But young, so that's probably the area. I don't see too many problems with too old. I mean, that doesn't come up,
Well, but I just had one recently, Dave, where it was the file comment wasn't specific enough. Where they basically said they're too old, and it's okay, they're too old if their life expectancy, for the length of the credit being offered, is going to be a problem. And then there's an exception specifically that talks to that, but you got to make sure that you're articulating why you're denying it. You're not just saying they're too old.
Speaking of us wise older people. So, all right.